You know that I live in Minneapolis, and we have had a very challenging winter in Minneapolis. It has been very icy in Minnesota this winter. And I came across a TikTok that I want to talk about today because I feel like there are things that I just need to speak about because it's happening in my backyard. And at the same time, the one thing that nobody needs right now is my opinion on the exact same thing that everybody else is talking about and has the same opinion about, if especially if they're people that are listening to us. So what I wanted to talk about was this TikTok that I came across. And it's from an artist, a content creator named AJ Hawkins. She is a death worker. She works in the area of grief and grieving and looking at death not as a big, scary, awful final thing, but as part of a bigger process, part of a bigger ecosystem. Anyway, that's what she does. And she had posted a video in April of 2025 when it became very clear that we were going to have to get out and protest to start making a change. She very recently reposted it with some kind of updates, and I was hoping we could talk about that today.
That's a great
Okay.
topic.
One of the things I really like about this topic is it's a very proactive, like, here are a number of things you can do. That's even too pedantic. That's too pedantic for what she's talking about. I'm just going to play the TikTok for you because you haven't seen it. She goes
Mhm.
on to describe like eight, I think, archetypes of people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, seven archetypes. I found it so useful and such a really great way of framing.
What if I'm not built for the front lines? This is a question that's been cropping up in a lot of my circles lately, and looking at the future ahead of us, it is a really valid question. Now, I'm somebody who loves to think about ecosystems, particularly the necrobiome, which is the ecosystem that surrounds death and decomposition. It's this complicated, complex, messy place where life and death are inextricably intertwined, and where some of the planet's most humble and disregarded creatures do the really critical work of transforming death into life. And if we think of revolution as being an ecosystem of transformative change, what are we doing if not composting a dying world? And if we think of revolution as an ecosystem, we recognize that there are all different kinds of creatures with different roles to play. Each role is individually insufficient, and yet because they are all interreliant, they are all collectively required for the survival of the whole system. And so I created a little map of the different types of roles that are going to be necessary, both in our present and in our future. And my hope is that maybe you will find one that you identify with and that suits your nature and your skill set and your resources so that you can find your place in the ecosystem. The first one, which is going to be most similar to being a frontline person, I am calling the offender. We are going to need people who are able and willing to be arrested. But this is not a role that is right for everyone. If you are a single parent, if like me, you are physically disabled, or maybe you have a job that allows you access to certain kinds of information, this might not be the right role for you. The next role I call the defender. These are people who are going to be comfortable moving through violent circumstances, but with a more de-escalating focus. I run a small business and a community space in a rural county where we center marginalized people, and sometimes I worry about our safety. And I'm really grateful that I know that there are people in our community that I can call upon if we need support. The next role I am calling a tender. I remember having a conversation with someone where I said, thank God the revolution needs childcare. It also needs grief support. It needs gardens. It needs community meals. It needs systems of community care. And for myself, this is one of the roles that I most identify with and I am most resourced to provide. The next role I am calling the mender. We're going to need people who can help us fix our cars, who can sew. And we are also going to need people who can repair relationships. We need people who have conflict resolution and mediation skills. There are going to be times when we disagree. There are going to be people who have complex relationship histories. And those things are going to need to be supported in community. The next role I am calling the pretender. I think an underappreciated and underestimated role is the people who can move through mainstream and normative society without really catching attention. These are the people who can access, share, and hide information, people, and resources. And it's really critical that they are able to move without being noticed. The next role I'm calling the connector. These are those people who always seem to know the person that you need to talk to. They help move materials, resources, information where it needs to go. And finally, the last role that I've identified, I'm calling the upender. And these are the people who can radically change your understanding of the world that we currently live in and the world that could be. These are the communicators and the visionaries and the artists and the activists of the radical imagination. These are the people who are going to illuminate a path forward that is inspiring enough for people to want to create it. And these are going to be the people who spark and sustain a sense of hope for the future. So if you are somebody who thinks the front lines are not for me, I hope that that offers you a sense of place in the process. And I invite you to share in the comments what role maybe you identify with as we work to compost this world together. Present day AJ here, note the bangs. This video was originally from April of 2025, and I've been growing and evolving this idea ever since. One of the biggest changes for me is the framing. What if I'm built for the front lines I've come to see as a wrong question? Not a bad question because it led me to some interesting places, but a wrong question nonetheless. I wanted to repost this video because it was really resonant with people last year, because I think the meat of the idea is still very relevant and timely. But I also wanted to call attention to the fact that I have posted an updated and expanded version of this idea. So if you resonated with any of the archetypes mentioned in this video, be sure to check out the updated videos in the playlist below.
This work probably isn't like radically revolutionary. It sounds vaguely familiar to some other types of work that I've done where people sort of fall into different gift sets based on their personality, their history, and all of those things. In light of the things that are happening in Minneapolis right now and around the country, frankly, around the world, I found it particularly relevant, and I liked the way that she framed each one of these. And even she admits it's not a perfect system, but it's, I think, a really useful jumping off point to discuss, like, what do we do now? Because I feel very helpless a lot of the times, and I've been protesting, tons of protesting. I'm going to do tons more protesting, and well, I would love to get your feedback, and then we can talk a little bit more.
So my initial reaction is that we do a lot of this kind of modeling in the corporate America. We figure out as a team who's got the gifts to do this, what is your communication style, what are the things you are good at, what are the things you like to do, what is needed on the team. So that's what it reminds me of, and I'm struck by how intentional we are about doing that in the corporate world as a team, because we have to get stuff done. And here we're in a position in the political world, the social world, in the real world, where we have to get something done because people are dying. People are dying in just disgusting ways. So we have to get something done, but we're not really intentional about figuring out as a team, what are we going to do to go forward to be the most effective? It's a great way to frame up the issue of we need to start putting ourselves in positions that we're good at, that we're passionate about, that we will be successful, that are needed, and organize ourselves in such a way that we can come together and effectuate significant change.
Yes, well said. I've heard other content creators in the political sphere talk about that they're getting a lot of questions from people saying, when do we move from peaceful protesting to violent protesting? And one in particular that I follow, who goes by Park Rose Permaculture, said, that's the wrong question. Our goal is not to move from peaceful protesting to violent protesting. Peaceful protesting is not going to affect a regime change. That's not what it's intended for. What it's intended for is to build a movement so that when we are ready to make that next big move, we have the mass of people and the energy and the motivation behind it. She said violent protests also don't affect change because, for one, it's violent. We don't want to do that. But for two, it just gets crushed then. Violence begets violence. She said, the goal next is going to be nonviolent protests. She said there's a vast difference between peaceful protesting and nonviolent protesting. Peaceful protesting is the No Kings rally, the Ice Out rallies, where you gather together in a location, you build the momentum, you build the community, and that's kind of where that ends. Nonviolent protesting is protests that are not violent, but they are disruptive, incredibly disruptive. And the more disruptive we can be while remaining nonviolent, that's the thing she said that is going to affect the change. So then, as I'm thinking this over with the framework that AJ has laid out, the archetypes that she described, there were at least 3 of those that could be frontline people who are going up to protest. But even among those group of protesters, there are going to be people who are right up front, who are disrupting, who are getting in the way, who are putting their bodies on the line. And then there also are going to be people who are de-escalating and whose role is to kind of keep as much peace as we can while we're disrupting. And then also she called the upender people who just give you a completely different perspective. So
the way that I read the situation right now, and I'm in a different country, so I don't see everything that's going on, but I think I get a pretty clear view. A violent protest is exactly what we're being baited to do, and it would turn bad for everybody who's trying to stand up to this. That's exactly what they're after, and if we fall into that, then we are falling exactly into the path, the trap that they want us to go into. I feel like the difficulty of non-violent disruptive protest is that that's what's getting people killed. Even less than that, peaceful protest is getting people killed. So how many offenders and defenders are we going to let die in the interest of not
I don't
peaceful
think that it's
protesting?
about us letting. This is happening whether we step up to the front line or not. This is happening. And I mean, almost the way that you framed it, like skirted right up against victim blaming in the sense of, well, if we are going out and protesting and it's costing us our lives, then the next best option is to what, not protest? Again, putting the onus on the people who are already the victims of this. I agree 100% what you said about being baited. And let me just tell you this. I have never been more proud to be a Minnesotan. I grew up in California. My whole entire adult life has been Minnesota. I consider myself a Minnesotan. I've been here longer than I was there. I am so proud of Minnesota right now because you're absolutely right. They're trying to bait us into violent protests. And I think that part of why Donald Trump thought that he could protest here and draw that riot out is because of George Floyd protests turned really violent really quickly. And I think he was expecting the same thing would happen. But we've learned a lot since then. We've also grown up. It was a completely different scenario. But Minnesotans, true, genuine, like born and bred or raised here or raised kids here, Minnesotans do not want to escalate this into violence or riot because we're also really smart and we recognize that that is only going to give them exactly what they want. So the next thing we have to do is be disruptive. We escalate to disruptive protests. I think because the regime was expecting a violent reaction and didn't get one, they have had to escalate their efforts to try to draw a reaction out of us. I don't think that either of those murders were accidental. I think that they were planned. I think the first one was planned, at least by that particular ICE officer. I think the second one was something that they have been encouraged to do. And all they had to do was find the next person who you could make some tangential argument that they were potentially violent. So Renee Good had a car. She had a vehicle. So it was completely self-defense, shoot her in the head 3 times because she could have run over me with a car. Second one, found a gun on him. Violent. He came at us brandishing a weapon. So I think that they are looking for those kinds of instances. It could be someone with a cane. It could be someone with an umbrella. They're just looking for people to murder because they have to escalate in order to get a rise out of us. And it's not working, and it is going to get more violent, and we are going to lose more people. That doesn't mean that we should stop what we're doing because that would be obeying in advance.
So let's break this down. I'm looking for lines because we need to make decisions as a society where our lines are going to be because right now, you're right. I think ICE agents are being encouraged to stir up violent reactions. And they're making up violent reactions already. They're making up violence already. So whatever motivation they have, and I think the motivation to get Minnesotans to be violent is that they can declare some sort of martial law, insurrection, and start keeping people in curfew and bring in National Guard against Minnesota, whatever the things are that are planned once the violence is reciprocated. They're already making up that violence being reciprocated. So what is the line right now? I mean, the people who are in Minnesota can't do any more violence. If they did more violence right now, I don't think it would make a difference to the administration. I think they're just waiting for a little bit of time to go by and make up story after story after story of violence from Minnesotans who are innocent people. They need to draw a line between actual violence from Minnesotans and the lies that they make up. So to me, that's not a line that we need to adhere to.
Do you mean that we might as well be violent since they're making it up that we're violent?
But I don't feel like the resistance is a violent resistance. I'm just saying that like we're avoiding that for no reason. But I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying it's already happening. We're going to be brandished as violent no matter what we do. And I'm not saying we should be violent therefore. I'm just saying that's not, we're not like holding ourselves back for that purpose. We're holding ourselves back because it's the right thing to do and because we're humane.
Yes.
The other line that I see is very difficult is peaceful protest versus disruptive protest. That's another line that's being absolutely blurred or erased by the regime. If we show up at a peaceful protest and we are faced with gas canisters and we run away from that or we start yelling, then all of a sudden it's not peaceful anymore because the peace was broken by the regime, not because it was broken by the people. So I think that line too of we're trying to play by these rules that don't really exist.
Yeah.
So I'm saying it makes it much harder to exist in this situation and to put ourselves in different roles when the rules are just completely gone.
Are the rules completely gone though? Or is there a playbook that they are playing by? Because the historians are looking at this and not just comparing it to Nazi Germany, but comparing it to a number of regimes. And there is a playbook and they are following it. So perhaps one of the things that we need to do, and I think we are, I think that when last year we were doing largely peaceful protests that were peaceful. I remember when one person posted, I wish that they had bouncy houses at these protests because my kids were bored. No, that's not what this is for. But that's how peaceful those were back then. We could bring our 3-year-olds to peaceful protests last year. Now that we're moving more into disruptive protests, the rules are changing, but they're not unpredictable. And I think part of the problem is we don't have a leader who is pulling us together and saying this is the next step. This is why I actually have been really dialed into a few of my favorite TikTok content creators because they are telling us the next steps. If we're paying attention, they are telling us what the next steps are. And I think we're actually doing a fantastic job of maintaining nonviolence in the face of being executed in the streets. Where do we go from here? I think is my next question. And I think that's your question as well. Where do we go from here? How do we escalate it in a way that's not violent, but that moves us forward toward the goal of overturning this regime?
I think the rules that we're used to living by, those have been blurred and erased for sure. So yes, there is a playbook that we could predictably see what's going to happen next. It might take a long time. We're in a different era. So yes, there are significant parallels, significant, very specific parallels, like the Nazi coat that Bovino wears, very specific parallels, the Nazi salute by Elon Musk. But the time frame that we have to live under and the social media that we have and the mindset that we have in 2026 that we wouldn't have had in 1940 or 1930, I think that all those things make it different. And I feel like since we haven't had a war like this on American soil for so long, that we have grown up in this mindset of here are the rules of society and law and politics, and those are all gone. So I think we need to first collectively agree that we're playing by a different set of rules, and we need to learn what those rules are, or what those norms are, or what the intended playbook is, and start fighting it that way, instead of saying, well, what are we going to do? Peaceful protest, disruptive protest, or violent protest? Those lines are already gone.
I think that in Minnesota, we have not yet crossed into violent protesting in face of violent actions against us. I don't see how it's not going to be coming.
I guess my argument is I don't think it matters, because we're already being accused of violent protesting.
Yeah, that's a really good question too. And I would still like to talk about these archetypes, but one of the biggest questions that I have been really thinking about is, what does a regime change look like? So in Nazi Germany, it was straight up war, fighting on the front lines, having a battle until one side became victorious over the other. I don't see that happening in the same way. I guess I'm wondering, like, let's say our current president should pass away of natural causes tomorrow. What happens next? So I know that most of the people in the cabinet are already the ones doing all the work, the ones doing all the harm. So those wheels are already set in motion, but they specifically have a hero leader that they have been following. And when that hero leader is gone, then what happens? And once that hero leader is gone, how does the other side take power? Like, what does that look like? Do we storm into the Capitol like they did on J6 and execute people? I mean, like, what does that look like? How do you take power back? And I think part of what's been so frustrating for me is that the Democratic Party as a whole, the people in Congress have been trying so hard to maintain decorum and play by the old rule book. So how do you take over a destructive regime like that when you are still trying to make sure that your tie is tied straight? Like, what does that look like? And then how will we know when it's happened? And I think people are putting so much pressure on the elections. What happens if the elections do get rigged? Then you've taken that off the table as a way to overturn a regime. So most regimes that have gotten this far and then have failed has been bloody violent.
I'm not even sure that we're asking the right question by saying, how do we overturn power? How do we take power back? What's that going to look like? How do we know when that's happened? I think that might not even be the right question, because we're playing under the rules of, typically you have an election and then you vote for who you want and then they take over political power. I think those lines are also blurred and erased right now. I think the elections are very difficult to trust, and there's no way that this current regime is going to say, oh, shucks, we just lost those seats and therefore you get to vote on what we do. They're already not following the laws. So what if a bunch of Democrats get in there into the House and Senate and we take over the majority, pass a bunch of laws, do some impeachments and some indictments? They're going to be ignored. So even if that sort of so-called electoral power takes over, I don't think that's going to be the difference. I think it has to be something different than that we're asking as a next step.
I think you're rephrasing exactly what I'm trying to get at, which is, what is the next step? Like, how do we get out of what we're in now? And I agree with you. I don't think that elections are going to be the way out of this. I don't want to see it turn violent. I don't see a lot of other ways that regimes have been toppled without some violence. So I would never condone that. I would never condone that. I'm just asking the question. I'm wondering, what's next? We've talked about this quite recently. You asked me a question of what's something that I've changed my mind about in the past 5 years. The thing that's really shaken me is that 2 years ago, I would have said there's good guys and bad guys. And I would have said all of the Republicans and all of the MAGA are bad guys. And all of the Democrats, not all, but, for the most part, are the good guys. And my eyes have been opened over the last year. And I would have to say, again, it's not a right versus left issue. It's a top versus bottom issue. And Congress are at the top. And so I do not trust even Democrats in Congress right now, because I feel like if they really were on the side of the people, there's more that they could be doing than sending strongly worded letters. And they're not doing. So I don't trust any of them. I really feel like it's going to have to be a massive overhaul of the entire system. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there are quite a number of seats up for grabs that if we could by some miracle pull off some kind of an election, we could actually just toss out the whole system that's in right now and just start fresh with some Gen Zs and young millennials and some women and some people of color and see what happens. That's what I would love to see. I don't see it happening, but that's what I think we need. America was founded on the lives of Black and brown people, and it's built into the DNA of the country. I think it has to burn down to the ground and be rebuilt out of ashes. But I don't know what that looks like.
I think we need to rely on the archetype of upenders to come up with some path forward that involves burning the system to the ground and burning the institutionalized racism down and burning the institutionalized separation of the haves and the have-nots. Burn all of that down. That doesn't mean we have to burn our country down or burn our societies down or burn our culture
or
down.
people.
I'm very I'm given a lot of hope from New York City that Mamdani was elected. He has new ideas. He has fresh ways of looking at things. He has equality, democracy, democratization of travel in the city, ability to live without, and eventually save some money and retire. I mean, all of those things are things that I think we need on a much, much bigger scale. And I think you're right. We need under 40s. We need a lot of female representation. We need a lot of people of color. We need people who are disabled. We need people who are transgenic. We need people who have faced trauma and who don't have any money, right? I mean, the systems are built right now that people in power, even in the Senate, they need so much money to get there.
Yeah.
You know, Mamdani moved from a one-bedroom apartment into the mayor's mansion. He didn't have money. He had support. He had ideas. He had charisma.
Yeah.
This is what we need. And I believe that if we were to able to fill Congress and Senate with people in that varied demographic, not old, rich, white men, then we might have a chance of carving a new way forward and burning down some of those institutions that never really did work for a majority of the people. But if it's just a bunch of old white men that we're electing who are calling themselves Democrats, nothing's going to change. The laws are not being followed right now. So it has to be a different way forward than passing the right law or holding this person accountable. It's not working.
And I feel like we're standing on a wooden bridge that's burning. And we are just hoping to God that we get to the other side before it burns and we all plummet into the depths of the canyon, right? Like, can we sustain this level of occupation in our city until whatever that next thing is going to happen?
So I see it a little bit less dire than you do. I do, because I've been listening to a lot of creators who describe what has happened in American history as parallels to what is happening right now. And we're not used to this in our lifetime, and we're not used to this as white people, to be frank, and we're not used to this as middle-class people. But there has been overt oppression and murder and suppression of different groups of people since the history of forever in the United States, right? That I'm not saying that it's right by any stretch. I'm just saying that this is not something that is completely new. It's to an extreme, and it's right in our faces, and it's happening at a very, very fast pace. And it's happening under a charismatic leader who happens to resemble Hitler in so many ways. So it's very stark to us and it's very dire. But we still have all of our institutions right now. We still have all of those things largely intact. And we thought the world would crumble when one more awful thing happens. The world will crumble when we have armed people on our streets. And the world will crumble when the Epstein files aren't released. And so all of these things that are happening one after the other, we can't imagine how devastating and dire that would be when that happens. And then it has happened, and we're still here, and we're still talking, and we're still a community. When TikTok gets taken over by Oracle, what's going to happen then? How do we communicate with ourselves? There are other ways to communicate with ourselves. So I don't see it quite as dire as you. I think that there might be like soldiers on both of the sides of the bridge who are coming closer to us, but that bridge is not burning. It's not. We're not going to, one more thing and we're going to fall into the abyss. That's not what's going to happen. We've already survived and been through so many crazy things, and people who are not as privileged as us have been through things just like this, where they're being murdered, they're being executed on the street for nothing, for no violence, no criminality, nothing at all. This has happened many, many, many times in the US, just not to us yet. So I feel like we're not going to fall into the abyss. We will figure a way out of this without falling into the abyss with a burning bridge. That's my perspective.
It's hard to see it. It's really hard to see it right now.
I know.
And I get your point that this is not new and that it's only a pain point for me now because it's creeped into my privilege.
I don't mean to make it so stark.
And I've actually done a lot of reflecting on this in the last couple of months. And I can't go back 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. I can't go back and change what I didn't know. But I can now. I can move forward now. And it feels a little bit like riding a bike without training wheels because I see now what the problems are, but it came like a flood and I don't yet know what to do with it or how to change my behaviors so that we can move towards this world that I can see is a possibility. I don't think a utopia is possible, but I think that a United States government that is governed by diversity is possible.
It's necessary. It's, in my opinion, the only way out.
So I don't yet know how. And this brings us back to what originally we were talked about with the archetypes. I don't still yet know where I fit into the bigger picture of what do I need to do when I wake up tomorrow morning so that the world can continue to move in that direction. Which is why I was so drawn to this, because AJ lays out a number of ways that we can do that. And I appreciated that she listed some things that are basically like, you got to keep living, right? Still need to go to a job. You still need to have childcare. You still need people who can fix cars. And if those people, if that's what their gift is, if those people are continuing to do that work in the world that we're living in right now, then maybe that is the path forward for those of us who are maybe not the offenders.
Hey, if you like our content, please like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm and it helps our content.
Thank you.
The other main point I got out of what she was saying is that, yes, of course, we need to go on with our lives and we need to have people who are the car mechanics, and we need to keep doing that. We need to keep going to work and we need to keep showing up and we need to keep feeding our kids. But the other big point is that whatever the next steps are, we need to do them together in a coordinated fashion. So me waking up in the morning, you waking up in the morning, I mean, you are an amazing, powerful person. But if I woke up in the morning tomorrow and thought, okay, I'm going to solve this, there's no way. We have to come together and do this together as a team. And that's really the only way that anything is going to succeed. So I'm not saying that people who are getting murdered are doing it on their own. I'm just saying like that's the ultimate sacrifice that a single person can make. And that's huge. And it's bringing us together. But we need to come together then. We can't just keep going one after one after one.
Is what you're saying. In and of itself, it's still not enough.
As monumental as it is, we need to do this together. Individuals are not going to affect any kind of change.
Okay, how do we do that?
We need to listen to the upenders. We need to listen to people who have been in this struggle for a very, very long time. And I think, unfortunately, at the moment, the threat to those people, and I'm speaking specifically about people of color who have been oppressed and suppressed for hundreds of years in the US, and honestly brought here against their will. So let's be very frank about that. Those are the people who we need to have listened to for the past 50 years, 100 years. And right now there's such a threat on that group of people that they're saying, you know what, I'm not putting myself out there because I will immediately be murdered. And they're not wrong. They've experienced this for so long that they know exactly what the consequences are. And I 100% respect that. And at the same time, I'm desperate to hear from people who have been doing this for a very long time, collectively and proactively and peacefully and non-violently, that we need leadership from that group of people because they've got the experience and the wisdom that we need. But it's also not fair of us to now ask that of them.
So maybe our job is listening to those voices and then moving forward with action.
Yes, keeping all of that wisdom and those people safe as much as possible. And we take on more of the risk, and then they take on more of the wisdom and the guidance.
I heard a Black creator yesterday that put up a photograph of a lynching, and the part that she put up was the observers and bystanders. And her point in the TikTok was, we still are showing up to protests, but not putting our bodies on the line for this. And she said, my ancestors didn't have a choice whether their bodies were on the line or not. So white people, what are you doing? Backing up when ICE comes at you, singing songs, keeping the peace, I think is what she was suggesting. Like, what are you doing? That is not going to be enough. She said, if all you're doing is showing up to the protest with your camera and then backing away when they throw canisters, you're no more than these observers. And I try really hard to listen to the message that's being spoken. And at the same time, I don't agree that the only way forward for us right now is when ICE comes at us, we come back harder. I can see that would have some really bad outcomes and not move us forward towards the goal that we're trying to achieve. So, like, on one hand, I get what she's saying is that we have to be willing to put our lives on the line because her ancestors didn't have the choice. Heard. And I'm incredibly proud of Minnesotans for not taking the bait to turn it more violent, because that's giving them exactly what they want.
There's a lot of similarities between the oppression and suppression of people of color over the decades and hundreds of years and today, but it's a slightly different situation. And right now, showing up for peaceful protests or disruptive protests is still working. It's still working. We see our elected officials seeing them. Historically, regime change has happened when a certain percentage shows up on the streets with peaceful protest. And once we reach that, hopefully at that time we're coincident with some sort of solution and a path forward. But it's not like it's nothing. It's not like it's not working.
It feels like it's not working when people die.
Okay, here's a call out to the upenders, to the thinkers, to the leaders. Mom Donnie, what do we do? What do we collectively do?
So here's another interesting perspective that I heard recently. Someone was saying that we are a culture of hero worshipers. We expect to have a hero to come and save us. Ironically, I think part of the reason we're in this situation is because the other side found their hero. They found their leader. And you can see the hero worship in the AI generated images of him just being so much more than he actually is, physically and vibe wise. But the problem is that we're like desperate and hungry for a leader to pull us together and to show us the way forward. And the creator I was listening to said, there ain't no one coming to save us. This has got to be us doing the work. That almost gives us permission to just keep moving forward despite the fact that we don't have a leader. Because if we just sit around kind of like, all right, I'm going to hold the line until a savior comes, and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing until a savior comes, it's not going to happen. We're never going to move forward. I think the point that they were making, which I took to heart, was we do have to start, like you said, listening to other voices who have been through this before, who have been screaming at us and we haven't heard it. But also we need to be pushing ourselves a little bit outside our own comfort zones, maybe a lot bit outside of our comfort zones, that this is not going to change until we are really uncomfortable, until we are in pain, until the pain point pushes us. Still, on a day-to-day basis, I don't know what that looks like, but I do feel like it's going to have to be from the bottom up. The change has to come from the people.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've got two main comments, though. One, I don't think we're looking for a leader like MAGA is worshiping Trump. I don't think we're looking for a leader like MAGA looks to Trump as a leader. We're not looking for a cult leader. We're not looking for someone to blindly follow. We're looking for voices of wisdom that could rally us collectively to work together as a team to go in a good direction, instead of each of us individually waking up in the morning and deciding, here's what I think I'm going to do today. Because us individually, as we said before, that's not going to do any good. We need someone to provide some sort of common voice. That's one comment. The other one is that I was very obsessed with following the Arab Spring. So back in 2010, Mubarak was kicked out of Egypt and arrested and taken out of power. And there was a vacuum of power, but it wasn't, the society wasn't set up to fill that vacuum of power. So they went a very long time without any kind of actual political leader. And what they did instead, which I think would be amazing to see here, what they did instead is to collectively get together in the coffee shops all over Egypt and talk about what their society needs to look like in the future. And these weren't the political leaders, and these weren't the church leaders. These were just people who drank coffee, and they would get together and talk about this and have some sort of collective communal discussion and decisions about how they move forward. So maybe this is something we could consider as a larger society in the US, is that we start doing these coffee collectives and talking as a community, the people who are people of color and oppressed, and the people who don't have a lot of money, the people who really need a change in this environment, to get together and start having those conversations collectively, and then sort of bringing that higher and higher to bigger and bigger groups of people, so we can collectively decide how we as a community want to go forward, not how our politicians want to go forward, or how Trump wants to go forward, or how MAGA wants to go forward, or how the oppressors want to go forward, but we collectively, how do we want to move forward? I think we should, at the very least, talk about it with each other.
I love that idea. And I also think that we're starting to already do that. I think that right now our coffee shops are our socials in a lot of ways. We are having those conversations. We're just not doing it in person. I do think, though, that there is some wisdom to what you're talking about, that I think communities are going to have to come together. And by communities, I mean like the town I live in, which is a suburb of the greater city of Minneapolis, which is a city within a greater state of Minnesota. And I think we have to start with the suburb before we even can talk about the city. I think that we have to be showing up for our neighbors. I think that we have to be patronizing small businesses. I think that we need to stop funneling our money into the big guys, into the corporations. One of the things that I'm also really proud about with Minnesota is that we take our education very seriously here. And while I know that we're not the number one anymore, although we were for a while, we are still like in the top 8, I think, for education. But the way that we're doing that is not by leaning on the country. It's by looking at the teachers and the parents and the educators that live in this state and listening to what the needs are of the students that are actually living in our communities. That's why we're so good at education, is because we're working ground up rather than top down.
That's what we need right now, is ground up, not top down. And all of our institutions are so top down and top heavy that it seems impossible to do that. But you're right, this collective spending money on your street for people who own businesses on your street and your neighborhood and your suburb. There are tons of suburbs, and all of them collectively have a lot of power.
It feels a little bit hopeful, because that is something that I can do, right? Like I could, and I actually have been considering this. I moved in June into an apartment, and I've been thinking I could get to know my neighbors better than I do now. And part of it is like, I'm going to wait till the weather's nice. I can't host the entire apartment complex in my apartment, but I could host.
Isn't there a rec room?
Yeah, there is. I want to even go more microcosm than the entire complex. I want to know the people on my floor, and then I want to know the people in my building. And I actually already started that. There are quite a few people on my floor that I know, and that we stop and talk in the hallway. But I want to do more of that. One of my thoughts was, I want to do a dog party. Every other apartment in this building that I'm in has a dog. What if we just, like in the spring, we live not very far from a big field. What if we just got together and let all the dogs run and play in the big fields and got to know each other? Some of my very best friends are friends because they lived across the street from me.
I love this very much, but I'm going to push a little bit back on you that we get up every morning in a quandary with stress in our stomachs and our heads and our necks. What are we going to do today to stop this? Because you feel like the bridge is burning, and there is dire situation depending on our perspective. Why not tomorrow get up and start talking to the dog moms? Form that community right now. Why in the spring? Yeah, it's going to be warmer, so what?
Well, pushing it off to spring has been my excuse for not doing it sooner. I'm using
Right.
the weather as an excuse because it sounds scary.
Those Minnesotans have been out in the minus 25-degree weather. That's not comfortable.
Yeah.
Let's talk briefly about money too, and I'm as guilty as anyone about this, but we're funneling all of our money to people who are holding us back because they collect all of the money. People in our country who are money hoarders are considered heroes, and we need to shut that down right now. What if we spend our money locally? Let me put it this way. Several people recently have given their lives to this cause, and I can't even imagine the sacrifice that was. And so, is there a level of sacrifice that we're willing to give? Like not shopping at Amazon, not shopping at Target?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be super uncomfortable, but we're not giving up our lives.
I have shifted my spending quite a bit actually, and I could do more. But I will say that I did this year for Christmas. I spent a lot more of my Christmas money supporting small businesses on Etsy. And I know that they were small businesses because they came with handwritten notes with my name on it. So I've started to make that shift. I do a lot more of my shopping at a local market. I used to do a lot more of my shopping at Target. I could do more though. I think it might be time for me to start. I even, in fact, I talked to my daughter about this today. I said, hey, there's a subscription that we're paying for a video game that she likes. And I'm like, are you still playing that video game? Because if you are, we'll keep the subscription. But if you aren't, we need to cancel that. She said, yeah, I do actually play it a lot. But also, the company that produces this one is in Sweden. And I'm like, okay, girl, okay, we can keep this subscription. But I'm thinking of getting rid of the Netflix, the Hulu, the Disney, the Amazon. It is painful, and the reason is because we are creatures of comfort, particularly here in the States. Creatures of comfort. And I'm a problem solver person. Like every time something isn't working quite right in my life, I figure out how to make it better. And a lot of times that means buying something to help solve the problem. And that is going to be a shift I'm going to have to make.
Yeah, I think we could actually make a difference doing that. And maybe not you individually, me individually. But what if we could raise our voices and say, if you're listening to us, you raise your voice about this. And we collectively, as a society of people who are in our position, we stop supporting the systems that we have that are so oppressive and that are putting us in this situation. I have another extremely radical idea, and that is bartering.
Great idea.
Going back to the basics of bartering. Let's say you have a gentleman's farm in your backyard and you have a couple of kids and the person next to you has a gentleman farm. And what if you ask them, can you tend to my farm for the day and I'll take care of your kids for the day? Or maybe once a week you have a big dinner and then every other person has a big dinner once a week and you can collectively spend less on food because you're sharing food instead of not sharing food. The opportunities for bartering are practically limitless. And I'm not saying only bartering because that's a big shift from where we are, but coming up with ideas like that, this is the Upenders' responsibility, is to come up with ideas and collectively raise our voices so that we can spread these ideas, start implementing them, even if they're uncomfortable, and start making a difference and start making ourselves feel like we're actually making a movement.
I have been hearing a lot more voices talking about withholding our dollars from the big guys as that is the path forward. And it feels off, but I think they're spot on. Like it feels like, well, if
Right.
I don't shop at Target, but I go down to the local mom and pop and buy my dinner there, how's that affecting like the people in the streets who are getting murdered? It feels off. But when we realize that the fight really is about top and bottom, and we're all at the bottom, 99% of us are at the bottom, then it really does start to feel like, okay, maybe the violence in the streets is to distract us from the efforts of withholding our dollars. Because as long as we have like we're in that reptile brain and in fear, we will have the capacity to think through how we're going to reshape our spending and reshape how we contribute and invest into the world.
Right. I mean, sometimes it's hard to get out of bed and we need that comfort of, I need something, I'm going to go to Amazon because I know it's going to work and I know it'll be here today or tomorrow, whatever it is. And to get out of that and to start really focusing on the things that matter. The protests matter, but where our dollars go matter, because honestly, I'm going to say something that shouldn't be controversial, But the United States right now is not living under a dictatorship or a fascist regime. They're living under an oligarchy of rich
A
men.
capitalistic
Rich men
oppressive.
are in power in the United States. Period. I mean, there's no arguing that.
Okay, so we had to just go take a little quick break to take care of kids stuff. And while we were away, I had a thought. How sick is this? I would rather go to the Whipple building with a gas mask and goggles and put my life on the line than to cancel my Amazon Prime subscription. I was thinking about it on the way over. I was like, I already have planned to go down to the Whipple building, but I get literally like panic attack at the thought of canceling my Prime.
They have you right where they want you.
I mean, it's eye-opening, and this has been building. It's not just like I had this aha moment 5 seconds ago. But the realization of how stark that difference is, I think I'm going to have to go through some serious looking at the capitalism and how that's been affecting my life.
Think ahead a few months as to how absolutely powerful you're going to feel, knowing that you're making yourself uncomfortable to do the right thing for the collective.
Here's my guess, too, is I don't think I'm going to be as uncomfortable for as long as I think about it now. I think I will get used to the new routine really fast.
My daughter gave up Amazon like 3 years ago.
To be fair, your daughter wasn't a product of the 80s. We were...
And she doesn't need stuff,
we were
right? I've already got all the
we
stuff.
were the spend generation, right? We were the kids who benefited from the affluence of our parents.
Right. Spending money in our pocket.
Yeah. So it's years and years, decades and decades of conditioning. But
right.
If anything, there are some positive things that are coming out of all of this tension that's being built in our culture right now. That's one of them, is that we have had to face our racism, our misogyny, our capitalism, and really look at not just how capitalism is destroying our country, but how our country's capitalism has destroyed so many other countries.
It's also a form of self-oppression that we're doing this. I feel like we've been trapped into it, right? Trapped and lied to, but we do have control over where we spend our money for the large part.
We do.
That's hard.
It's really hard. It's hard because living in this system is so particular. You know, like I would not be able to live off the grid. Like in my home right now, I can't grow my own food. I just don't have that capacity. So a lot of the systems that were developed, we are now, like you said, trapped into by necessity. But I think there are a lot of systems that I could start to unravel myself from, unentangle myself from, that maybe would help move the country in a better direction if a lot more of us were doing it. And there are people that have been doing this for a really long time and have been speaking about it and have been shouting and screaming about it. And I haven't been listening. Oh, I'm listening now.
I think we can give ourselves grace for the growth that we're doing today without feeling bad that we haven't yet.
Yeah, it's hard. And here's the thing. When it's just you and me talking, I'm perfectly willing to be like, damn, girl, I've really been blind for 57 years. And I have really contributed to the bullshit for 57 years. And the thought of putting that out into the world where other people who have been fighting this fight for their entire lives might be listening and going like, are you serious right now? Like I had just invested an hour of my time to have you realize that you should cancel your Amazon Prime. But it's so much more than just those little behaviors. It's a lifetime of conditioning that we're talking about overcoming. And I'm so glad to be awake now, to be honest. Even though it's really uncomfortable, I'm so glad to be awake now. Maybe we can hand off the world to our kids. Or what we're handing them is a hot mess. But maybe what they can build out of what we hand them could be a much better world.
That's the dream. So thank goodness for those people who are already doing the work that we're discovering that we need to do. Thank goodness for them, because they're leading on this and their voices need to be risen up. I've been noticing a movement right now of embracing people who are coming out of something difficult. So the paradigm is embracing people who are willing to leave the MAGA cult and not saying, fuck you, you voted wrong, you're dead to me, right? And instead saying, you've been in this cult and you're waking up and it's so powerful that you're doing that. And please come and be part of the community of people who are trying to be humanistic and kind. So that embracing people when they're ready to come out of that cult. And that's a really hard thing to do. It's a really hard thing to do. But I think with something as relatively minor as this, where you're coming out of the Amazon Prime cult, I think the general person who's been standing up to capitalism for a long time is probably the person who would also be embracing you, embracing us as we take these steps. And instead of saying, well, you stupid have been doing that for so long and I'm just discovering it right now. No, I think they're going to be like, you know what? Yay, we did one more. We got one more.
I hope so. I hope so. I'm going to be real honest. It's unusual for me to feel naive because I am a really smart woman. I'm really well educated. I know a lot of shit about a lot of shit. And I'm now also learning that I don't know a lot about most things, more than I thought. And not just uneducated or uninformed, but just naive. The naivete that I feel about just in the last 5 years opening my eyes to what other people who are living in this country are experiencing is humbling.
I don't think it's because you weren't paying attention. The naivete was not because of an internal fault to you. It's the society we're living in. I have a fresh perspective on that because I used to hate being uninformed or naive or not knowing about something. I hated that. And I've shifted my perspective big time that I'm 55 years old and there's not a whole lot that's new to me in this world. I've heard the jokes, I've listened to the music. But when I figure out a whole world of something that I've not experienced before, instead of approaching that like, oh shit, I'm naive and I hate that feeling, I'm saying, oh my God, I'm still alive. I still get to grow as a person and I get to go explore all of this fascinating, useful stuff about the world that I didn't know before. And it just changes everything in my perspective of hating my naivety versus excitement about exploring new things that are important.
I will try to lean into that. I also don't want to skip too quickly over the discomfort.
Dirty fork in the sink.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I actually feel really hopeful. I feel like there's a lot I actually can get up and do in the morning.
Amazing. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yay.
God, now I have a full now I've got a
TV.
full calendar again. Because now I gotta do shit. God damn it.
But you want to do that. You want to do shit.
You know what? I didn't even think about this. I spent so much of, I would say like around 2019-ish to probably 2023, 24, doing some really massively huge, uncomfortable things that were good and positive, but really hard. And leaning into moving through the fear. So I think largely in 2024 and 2025, I was like, I'm just going to sit back and be comfortable for a minute. And now that itch is coming back, that it's time to be done being comfortable and move into the next new scary thing.
Hey, that's brave.
Well, we'll see how much I actually get done. But I think I'm ready.
So I'm going to tell you a little story just to close things out. You live in a place right now where you can walk to stuff. You can walk to stuff to buy and to eat and to look at. And I know that it's winter and it's very cold, but you could either get in your car, load up your dog, load up your kid in the car, drive over to Target, have to park, walk to the thing, buy the stuff at Target, make the rich people richer, bring it all home, park in all that stuff. Or you can go out in the sunshine with your puppy in his boots and your kid in his wheelchair. You just wheel him right out. You don't have to load him into anything. Just wheel him right out. And you get the vitamin D and you get the exercise and you get the neighbors who are waving at you and honk, honk, hi. And you get to go to the places where they know you again and you get to spend money on people who are your community.
It has been such a life-changing shift for me that when my daughter's car broke, we didn't set out to buy her a new car. We just decided we would share mine because I hardly ever need it anymore. I needed to go get mom places because she's in a wheelchair and she needs rides to things. That's about it. Everything else I can do locally in the community. Thank you for that story. Thank you. It reminds me I do hard things.
Kiwi says if you like this content, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.